Now, here is the first section entitled Feminine. 1. Femininity defined. On a Saturday morning, a group of women in a diner gossip and giggle about other women in parish leadership. They focus on the faults, mannerisms, and ideas different from their own of these women. An observer might remark, "What silly, petty women." Suddenly, the teenage son of one of the women bursts in with the news that dad has just been in a serious car accident and is being rushed to the hospital. Mom rushes out the door, face contorted with anguished compassion. The other women hurriedly pay the bill and take the women's children to their own homes for care and comfort during this emergency. The observer might now remark, "What wonderful, nurturing women." These incidents illustrate traits considered more feminine than masculine, compassion and motherliness, but also gossiping and silliness. There are many traits, positive and negative, that we generally associate with women rather than men. Let us look at some of these. A, feminine traits. While the word female refers to the biological characteristics of girls and women, the term feminine has a wider reference. Feminine pertains to the traits associated with the womanly personality, although these traits are also present in another manner in some men. Many people would call certain qualities, some positive, some negative, particularly feminine. Below is a list of some of these qualities. Check the ones you think describe you. Circle the ones you wish you were to a greater degree. So here's a list of feminine traits in alphabetical order. Affectionate, capable, catty, charming, chatterbox, compassionate, complaining, considerate, delicate, diplomatic, empathetic, enduring, expressive, faithful, fearful, flirtatious, gentle, gossipy, graceful, hospitable, hysterical, intuitive, manipulative, modest, moody, nagging, naive, nurturing, obedient, overly sensitive, passive, receptive, petty, polite, pouty, prudish, pure, quiet, receptive, responsive, seductive, sentimental, silly, sincere, slavish, smothering, spiritual, spiteful, supportive, sweet, talkative, tender, trusting, vain, vulnerable, warm, weak, weepy, wise, wishy-washy. Of the above, most participants in my workshops on the feminine consider the following to be positive descriptions: affectionate versus prudish, charming, compassionate, considerate, delicate, diplomatic, empathetic, enduring, expressive, faithful, gentle, graceful, hospitable, intuitive, modest, nurturing, obedient, perceptive, polite, pure, quiet, receptive, responsive, sincere, spiritual, supportive, sweet, tender, trusting, vulnerable in the sense of emotionally open, warm, and wise. Some well-known women from history, literature, and contemporary life exhibit many of these positive feminine traits. Ruth, Naomi, Sarah, St. Anne, St. Elizabeth, Mary, the Mother of God, St. Gertrude, St. Elizabeth of Hungary, St. Teresa of Lisieux, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton, and many other women saints. Cordelia of King Lear, Melanie in Gone with the Wind, Grace Kelly, and Mother Teresa of Calcutta. In my unofficial survey, Most people consider these to be negative feminine descriptions. Catty, chatterbox, complaining, flirtatious, manipulative, moody, nagging, naive, passive, petty, pouty, prudish, seductive, sentimental, silly, slavish, smothering, spiteful, vain, weak, weepy, wishy-washy. Shakespeare put in the mouth of Iago, the villain of Othello, this derisive description of the feminine. You are pictures out of doors, bells in your parlors, wildcats in your kitchens, saints in your injuries, devils being offended, players in your housewifery, and housewives in your beds. Famous women who manifest negative feminine traits include Delilah, Salome, Herodias, Medea, Cleopatra, Ophelia, Margaret of Goethe's Faust, Madame Butterfly, Anna Karenina, Grushenka of the Brothers Karamazov, Scarlett O'Hara, Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Blanche of the Streetcar Named Desire, Jean Harris, Dolly Parton in her typical film roles, Lucy of I Love Lucy, Edith Bunker of All in the Family, Alexis of Dynasty. The nature of feminine traits. Positive feminine traits can be grouped into three clusters: warmth, charm, and intuitiveness. Negative feminine traits can be grouped under the negative opposites of these clusters: coldness or smothering, repression or seduction, and overcriticism or subjectivism. Warmth versus coldness. A warm woman exhibits a combination of traits: responsiveness, compassion, empathy, endurance, gentleness, tenderness, hospitality, receptivity, sensitivity, consideration, courtesy, supportiveness, and faithfulness. Such a woman is said to be motherly, loving, or in modern parlance, nurturing. Warmth is not only the opposite of coldness, but also of the distortion of affection that is found in smothering, which includes negative feminine traits such as pettiness, manipulativeness, complaining, nagging, pouting, and spitefulness. Warmth is a responsive love to the neediness of others. A woman who is empathetic and sensitive is highly aware of the vulnerability of others and reaches out to them. In the single life, womanly warmth expresses itself in the family, in work situations, in the parish and community, and in friendships with women and men. Married women lavish warmth primarily on their husbands and children. Consecrated religious women manifest warmth largely in prayer, in their communities, and in ministry. Coldness comes from self-preoccupation. Signals that others are in need do not reach the heart. This self-preoccupation usually springs from deep psychological causes, such as inadequate mothering or from past experiences of feeling victimized by particular types of individuals, so that one may be cold toward one group, yet warm towards others. The need to smother usually results from an insecurity about oneself and others. Afraid of failure, such a woman surrounds others with her worried precautions, nags them to succeed, and feels personally deflated when loved ones show their shortcomings. Charm versus seduction. The word charm originally characterized a word or thing thought to have magic power. The word charm comes from the Latin carmen, meaning song, from canere, to sing. A charming woman is one who attracts and delights. Charm is a composite of sweetness, grace, expressiveness, delicacy, sensual receptivity, and the emotional openness we call vulnerability. Some consider charm a synonym for physical beauty, yet we all know women whose physical perfection seems plastic and stiff, and others who are not conventionally attractive yet who emanate charm. It is said that Alma Mahler, wife of Gustav Mahler, was a large, clumsy woman, and yet even in her 70s charmed the milkman at her door. A single woman exudes charm as a daughter and a sister in the family and in school, work, and social life. While a married woman should be especially charming with her husband and children, she is also charming with relatives, guests, and people at work. A woman religious becomes charming in her bridal relationship with Christ, as the imagery of the Song of Songs describes. This charm expresses itself in her relationship with others, not as a prelude to sexual intimacy, but as a delicate receptivity and appreciation or a warm, unrepressed presence. It is easy to see what charm is by considering its opposite, a repressed plainness. A locked-up woman is unresponsive, often bitter and resentful. She lacks the delicacy to appreciate what is lovable in others. Many repressed women are shy, which seems to exonerate them from blame. Yet psychologists show that shyness, while rooted in sad childhood circumstances, also demonstrates a self-absorbed fear of being hurt, an unwillingness to risk hurt in order to affirm others. Charm's negative opposite is called seductiveness. While the genuinely charming woman wants to show her responsiveness to others because she values them, the flirtatious or seductive woman wants the thrill of conquest. The seductress is not concerned with the other person except as one who can confirm her own sexual value, even though she may not even like sex very much. In contrast, the charming, affectionate woman is aware of the attractiveness of others and indicates this by a sort of playfulness of positive warmth. Intuitiveness versus subjectivism. The feminine trait of intuitiveness is somewhat controversial. It doesn't mean having hunches, but coming to a truth through a perceptiveness and a wisdom that is deeper than the analytic process. For example, by philosophical analysis, one can demonstrate the need for the existence of God, but most women prefer to find God through intuitions of his presence in beauty and goodness. Intuition is the opposite of overly critical, destructive reasoning. Intuition pierces to the center of reality, whereas the analytic process merely circles and takes jabs at it. But intuition is also the opposite of subjectivity, in which emotion overtakes reason to yield biased or sentimental ideas instead of truth. Single women might demonstrate intuitiveness in their relationships within the family, at school, at work, in the parish community, and in friendships. Often single women less burdened by family duties will become informal or formal counselors, using their intuitive gifts to benefit others. Married women greatly need intuition in their dealings with husband and children because they must adapt general truths to their loved ones' individual characters. Women religious need intuitive wisdom to respond to God revealed in his teachings and providence, lest they lose their faith through the influence of rationalistic trends. Roots of the feminine. We can gain deeper insights into feminine traits by examining their roots. Various disciplines such as biology, psychology, and sociology offer theories about the sources of feminine traits. It is important to cover some of these ideas in detail because Christian feminists, in critiquing magisterial teachings, often assume that natural knowledge does not substantiate Catholic concepts. Biological features of the feminine. Since I'm a philosopher and spiritual writer and not a biologist, there's no way I can present a definitive analysis of the research past and present concerning the biology of the sexes. Nonetheless, it's important to consider them. We often hear references to the merely biological differences between men and women as if these considerable differences had little relationship to real masculine and feminine characteristics. I agree instead with those thinkers who hold that physical differences are the manifestation as well as the causes of many psychological, intellectual, and spiritual differences. As you read this section, you may want to make it more personal by pausing to consider how a particular fact or theory corresponds to your own thoughts and feelings as a woman. Here are key points culled from many sources concerning the biological differences between males and females. Males have more muscle than females. In any given population, the average male height and weight will exceed the female average. The human male is more susceptible to many diseases and birth defects. Females, on the average, live longer than males. Females mature earlier. The female hormonal system operates on a more cyclical pattern. Male and female brains differ. Male and females differ in sex organs, body hair, and vocal pitch. Some thinkers hold that greater physical strength naturally leads to dominance and aggressiveness as part of the male role of ensuring the physical survival of the tribe. Studies of male primate behavior may indicate this. The references to Tiger and Fox, 1971. According to Darwin, natural selection, the survival of the fittest, determined that men have stronger, bigger bodies and wider, more muscular shoulders than women. Women differ from men just as mares differ from stallions. Man reacts to nature by attack and penetration. He fights animals and conquers forests. He is against nature. In contrast, woman is more in tune with nature because of her birthing cycles. According to Freud, females are passive because they have less libido or life energy. Women may be considered physically weaker because so much of their biological energy goes into reproductive functions, menstruation, childbearing, and breastfeeding. In addition, man's sexual nature involves the aggressive thrust of the penis with the woman in a submissive posture. Darwinian and Freudian interpretations of biology, however, need not lead to the assumption that women are biologically inferior or secondary. According to Hans Urs von Balthasar in Ephesians 5:21-33, and Humanae Vitae, a meditation in Christian married love, 1981-62, competent biologists have expressed the view that the basic embryonic structure of all living beings, including man, is primarily feminine, and the subsequent differentiation of the male arises from a tendency toward extreme formations, while the development of the female shows a persistence in the original balance. In an article by Joe Durden-Smith, Male and Female Why, we find this surprising information. The female fetus has two X chromosomes. The natural form of the human is female. It is the male's Y chromosome that interferes with the natural development by causing production of something called H-Y antigen. This coats the developing gonads and forces them instead to become testicles that pump out a hormone which absorbs the feminine female structures that would have become the womb, and then they produce testosterone, which causes the progressive reshaping of the male genitalia. This is from Durden Smith in The Collegiate Career Woman, 1980. Clearly, it is biased thinking to consider the strength to move boulders the model for physical prowess and the ability to bear children an inferior function. The biological energy required by female functions might instead be considered to make women superior. Relating this information to negative and positive feminine traits, one might say that relative muscular weakness is a root of the passivity of women in male-female relationships. On the other hand, a woman's ability to bear children carries with it advantages for expressing the positive feminine traits of empathy and warmth. What is more, the greater delicacy of the feminine frame has a lot to do with positive traits of charm and evocation of the lyrical. Think of the beauty of the body of the ballerina as the male dancer supports her graceful movements. Another biological feature that greatly affects feminine traits is the menstrual cycle. Psychologist Carl Stern in The Flight from Woman, 1965, considers it a positive feature of the female to be tied to nature and unable to control it. He points out that mother and matter are related words, and that because of her cycle, woman has time in her own body in a deeper way than man does. Women scholars in many fields tend to be interested in the ways the menstrual cycle contributes to the development of negative feminine traits. Differing energy levels throughout the cycle can lead to nervousness and moodiness. A woman is much more responsive in relationships and in work situations at certain times of her cycle than at others. The frequent presence of pain, often severe during the menstrual flow, certainly causes many a woman to feel victimized by her sexuality, and consequently she may be tempted to nag or lash out at the men in her environment. See Harding, 1971. The female experience of the sex act itself may also affect negative and positive feminine traits. The woman's sexual organs are basically concave and thus suitable to receive a convex object, the penis. While Carl Stern believes this phenomenon contributes positively to feminine receptivity, Simone de Beauvoir, 1952, in The Second Sex, writes that the female sexual shape is a symbol of humiliation and slavery. A foreign body can penetrate and enter her. The male's experience of sex involves no such violation of his interiority. The male penis represents his agility and strength, while the woman's concavity represents her inferior imminence. She can only receive by waiting and then clinging, a negative posture, according to de Beauvoir. I agree with Stern that the woman's sexual role is positive, receptive. In the sex act, the woman provides a home for the male, even a symbolic return to the womb. On the other hand, a woman must be open to receive the power of the male sexual entry. Self-images of independent completeness and overly ambitious desires for fulfillment on her own terms may block a woman's experience of the joy of receiving the mysterious otherness of a man. Women who are puritanical about sex may be refusing to accept that they have a female body desiring to remain intact, or hating to need others. The body is seen as a dirty, alien and uncontrollable thing. Lesbianism may be related in part to a resentment toward this invasion by the dominant male, creating a preference for the equality of the mutual touch in female-female sexual relations. Masturbation as a sexual lifestyle could also be viewed in some cases as a bid for autonomy and as a means for avoiding the vulnerability that women feel in male-female sexual relations. Some psychologists consider the essence of female sexual joy to be related to the desire to be impregnated rather than orgasm, however subjectively pleasurable the latter might be. Carl Stern thinks it is a woman's sexual nature to want to hold and envelop the male organ inside her, just as she will eventually envelop the child. He finds the contemporary emphasis on female orgasm to be a masked form of frigidity. It would seem self-evident that childbearing is the apex of the feminine experience of life. Yet in our society, it has become almost peripheral, largely due to the contraceptive mentality. Our urban manner of living permits pregnancy to be almost a private event and militates against the consciousness of pregnancy as central to womanhood. Compare this to the vision a young girl would have of her own future were she living in a small village. There she would know of the birth of babies within a day, watch them being breastfed, and perhaps every few years count one new baby born to each fertile woman. Here again, we find a physical root of femininity contributing to both positive and negative traits. Some of the most endearing womanly qualities stem not from direct experience of pregnancy, at least from the potential for nurturing a tiny human in one's own body. Once the shock of finding oneself pregnant wears off and the morning sickness is over, a woman usually feels extremely tender and sweet toward the miniature person in her womb. No bond, psychologists tell us, is as strong as that between a mother and her child. Many women who abort go through intense anguish at the time their baby would have been born had they carried them to term, Stern, 1965. The child is a part of the mother, observed the writer Gertrude Fudler-Fort, 1962, and the mother can feel this being part of as something blissful. Loss of such oneness accounts for the sadness of postpartum depression. I recall that in spite of extreme morning sickness due to a twin pregnancy and fear of yet another miscarriage, I was euphoric in my sense of self during that pregnancy. Proud, dreamy, and content, I walked around as if bearing the Savior. Such memories ratify the statement of Carl Stern, 1965, in The Flight from Woman, that the sense of the infinite importance of the individual is rooted in the experience of pregnancy, birth, and nursing. Every birth is a nativity, a cooperation with God's basic act of creation. A woman develops the warmth of her character as she cherishes her unique baby. As Dietrich von Hildebrand wrote in Man and Woman, children are the love of the couple made visible. That's von Hildebrand, 1965. See that page 91 to 93. During my last pregnancy in my middle 30s, this joy reached its peak. Since I had already fulfilled my career goals, I was better able to enter into the mysterious meaning of life itself, which transcended all exterior aims. I wondered if my previous ambitions had made me too masculine to fully enjoy my first experiences of motherhood. Surely the insight into the masculine world afforded me by my career helped me understand Darwin's ideas that women had become more tender and less selfish because of their maternal instincts, while men had become less warm so that they had to rival other men. Men had learned to find their delight in competition. Darwin's ideas also explain why men spend their weekends in front of the TV set watching other men compete at sports. In Male-Female Y, Durden Smith provides a sociological perspective. For 99% of human history, we lived as hunter-gatherers. The men had been hunters, loners, requiring pronounced visual skills and goal direction. The women have lived together in groups with children and the old. So it seems to me evolutionarily adaptive that women have acquired different abilities, social, acculturative, nurturant ones that men by and large don't have. This implies a sexual stamping, a generic one in the brain and the fetus, reinforced and magnified by our cultural institutions. That's Durden Smith, 1980, page 14. So far, the writers quoted have emphasized the positive feminine traits that result from the uniquely female ability to bear children in the womb. What about the other side? Simone de Beauvoir in The Second Sex sees pregnancy as a symbolic enslavement and the child as a sort of parasite gnawing away at the mother's strength. For de Beauvoir, the maternal instinct should not be glorified, for it is a mixture of many emotions. Perhaps the experience of being a victim of one's own body can partially explain such negative traits as being self-pitying, weepy, complaining, nagging, and spiteful. This may also be a woman's way of getting even with the impregnating male who is physically freed from the burden of his fertility. Let's return to the positive experience of the female body and its potentialities. The word bonding is being used to describe the link that forms between mother and child during pregnancy and that continues after birth. Many women believe that breastfeeding is part of this bonding process. The hormones that a mother builds up during pregnancy prepare her for breastfeeding and other maternal responses, as indicated in many studies. Breastfeeding, however, has not always been popular in our society. In the beginning of the industrial era, when it became profitable to hire women for factory work, breastfeeding went out of style, and the invention of the bottle was considered a wonderful advance. In our day, breastfeeding is on the upswing. Studies show that human milk is healthier for the body than substitutes. The sensual, emotional, and spiritual joys a mother experiences by breastfeeding, as well as the great importance of the bond that nursing creates between the baby and the mother, are being emphasized. Such physical aspects of mothering affect the development of positive feminine traits. A study of female rats shows an interesting difference in behavior pre- and postpartum. After giving birth, the rat preferred looking for food rather than staying with baby rats in the environment. After giving birth to her own babies, she would remain close to the babies rather than seek food. This could be seen as analogous to the willingness of human mothers to sacrifice for their children. Some women find that their breasts ache when they imagine their infants are in trouble. Some proponents of breastfeeding, including members of La Leche League, hold that mothers have more empathy for the children they breastfed than for those they fed with a bottle. One African word for mother means, "She who hears when I call." The physical roots of feminine traits are not limited to women who actually bear children in the womb. Women who adopt can be just as maternal as birth mothers, and so can single and celibate women. One explanation, which concurs with the theory of Carl Stern and others, is that the biological capabilities affect the whole psychology of a woman, whether or not these capabilities are fulfilled. Another reason all women can be maternal might be that the feminine figure is generally rounder and softer than the male figure. Clothing that emphasizes a woman's breast has a maternal, earthy appeal as well as a sexual one. To be held by a woman gives one a feeling of sinking into warmth, of coming to refuge. Being hugged by most men gives one a greater feeling of protective strength. Of course, the same feminine figure can symbolize such negative feminine traits as smothering or promiscuous seductiveness, and such positive traits as beauty and delicacy. Many women are too close to their own bodies or too intimidated by perfect fold-out images to realize that men find the feminine body in itself attractive. A woman's genital sexual sphere is veiled and hidden, unlike a man's. This contributes to the mysterious quality men find in women, claims Gertrude von Lefort, 1962, in The Eternal Woman. Such factors may heighten the sensual receptivity of women or lead to polar negative traits, a puritanical closeness at one extreme and coquettish attempts to trap a man at the other. What about brain differences between female and male and their effect on feminine traits, such as silliness, being scatterbrained, petty, sensitive, or intuitive? Male and female Y summarizes studies on the nature of the brain and its hemispheres. These studies indicate that the left hemisphere of the brain, which specializes in visual tasks, mathematics, perception of spatial relations, and conceptualization, is more developed in most males than in females. The more developed right brain of females makes them better at verbal skills and more sensitive to nuances. Females are sensitive to context, good at picking up information that is incidental to a task that set them, and distractible. Jordan Smith, 1980, 11-13. This makes them adept at reading emotions in faces and hearing nuances in voices. Such sensitivity can explain why women have so many observations to share when chatting. The appearance of silliness can belie the deep-rooted need to understand what is going on in personal situations. While reading a Jane Austen novel consisting mainly of conversations between women in a small English village, I was struck by this comparison. All the intellectual energy a contemporary woman devotes to her career used to be expended in arranging daily life situations to ensure the greatest comfort and pleasure. In the past, a woman worked to create a comfortable environment for her guests. Even the character defects of her guests were mitigated by such strategies as well-planned scene arrangements or a subtle compliment. One wonders whether our contemporary need to get high as quickly as possible in social occasions is related to the lack of interest women now take in studying the intricacies of social interaction. Naturally, the same intuitive wisdom once employed for the comfort of others can be used to further selfish purposes as well. For instance, in making contact with useful people. It is often said that women are more intuitive because they combine heart and head more often than their male counterparts do, an idea which can be evaluated negatively or positively. For example, according to Carl Stern, the Spanish philosopher Ortega y Gasset thinks women are less rational and practical than men. Stern describes men as going around objects from the outside in an overly analytic manner, whereas women internalize, permitting reality to enter themselves and coming into intellectual sympathy with an object before drawing conclusions. Stern, 1965, 25 to 26. Sociological and psychological factors. Many battles are being fought between those who believe that negative feminine traits are caused solely by sociological and psychological reinforcement, largely in the interests of men, and those who consider such feminine traits innate. In another less vitriolic camp, we find those who argue that positive feminine traits are indeed largely dependent upon reinforcement, and the growing lack of such support in our feminist climate is leading to the disappearance of some of the noblest qualities of the human race. Let us examine some very prevalent feminine traits to determine their roots. Nurturing. Much discussion concerns the concept of nurturing. Woman is seen as one who nurtures, who provides what is nourishing in the way of food and psychological support. In the past, this quality was more simply designated by the words motherly, maternal, or even more simply love. Thus, Dante wrote that woman possesses the spirit of love. Lord Byron penned these fascinating lines in the poem Don Juan. Man's love is of man's life a thing apart. 'Tis woman's whole existence. That's from Canto the First. A child learns to communicate intersubjectively as he lies in his mother's arms, receiving essential food and tenderness. A mother's experience of loving empathy with her needy, completely dependent child may lead her to view all human beings as children who still need her food, her warmth, her compassion. And thus she becomes not only tender, but also sensitive. That is why women ought to become nurses, teachers, social workers, and even business women, because they may bring their womanly love into such public situations. Edith Stein attributes the ability to sense the value of the unique individual to the physical realities of motherhood, where the woman offers her body as home for the precious child. That's Edith Stein, 1987. I would add that in this era, when abortion is available, legal and socially accepted, childbirth is no longer seen as the inevitable result of sexual intercourse. The choice for motherhood, therefore, requires more conscious attention to the special value of the child. In a Different Voice by Carol Gilligan, 1982, introduces an illuminating idea. Girls become more empathetic because their mothers identify with them as females, whereas boys seem different to the mother. Simone de Beauvoir claims in The Second Sex that because women in the past did not compete with men at work, they ratified rather than rivaled the men in their lives. A woman gives a man a kind of rebirth through her faith in him. A nurturing function of women can also be related to her special manner of using her mind. Housewifery, according to Simone de Beauvoir, means giving attention to little things in a limited sphere. While de Beauvoir insists that such a life is an intolerable restriction, G.K. Chesterton in What's Wrong with the World, 1942, 153 FF, argues that work in the home is gloriously universal and superior to the specialized tasks of masculine work in the world. The wife and mother is simultaneously sage, psychologist, doctor, cook, manager, teacher, and so forth. Writing at the dawn of English feminism, he found it contradictory that women wanted to rush out of their homes to do for strangers what they could do more successfully for their own dear families. He quipped that in his time, thousands of women shouted, "We will not be dictated to anymore," then rushed out with their steno pads to take dictation. An idea of Carl Stern, which I have substantiated by observation, concerns the motives of a woman's thinking process. When men express their ideas, they concentrate on concepts, moving from concept to concrete examples, and then returning to the concept. A woman is concerned about the listener's needs. She hunts for a truth that will be relevant to her listener and explains her thoughts in terms of that truth. It would be interesting to study women teachers to test my assumption that they frequently use personal examples, not only for the sake of clarity, but also to make ideas directly significant to the lives of their pupils. In a novel about women intellectuals, Gaudy Night, 1936, Dorothy Sayers explores the idea that although women can be just as brilliant artists or thinkers as men can, few women believe that such creativity is equal to the creativity of love and motherhood. The concept that women are nurturers is not amorphous. It permeates our culture in vivid images of feminine heroes. I find a strong contrast, for example, between the characters Melanie and Scarlett in the movie Gone with the Wind. Scarlett, in selfish pursuit of her own goals, tramples on the needs of those to whom she should be most sensitive. Melanie is her foil, representing all the sweet goodness of positive femininity. The great Russian novel Anna Karenina also depicts a nurturing woman, Kitty, whose virtues are highlighted by the portrayal of an opposite type of woman, Anna. Anna's desire for personal romantic fulfillment leads her to abandon not only her undeserving negative masculine husband, but also her beloved son. Obsessed by jealousy of her lover, she can get little joy from the birth of their love child and refuses to attempt to conceive the son her lover longs for. Kitty, who chose real love after being rejected in her infatuation love, enjoys the contentment of motherhood. Anna, who plunged into the world of Eros and desperately sought life, ends in suicide, the total negation of life. Mary, the mother of God and the archetypal woman, enters our culture not only spiritually, but also visually through millions of paintings and statues. She is depicted as full of compassion and tenderness for the infant Jesus and for us, her spiritual children. Many of the active women saints are women of universal love who reach out to help the poor and needy and long to comfort them with their own hands, their own tenderness. In my childhood on Mother's Day, it was traditional to hear a sugary song on the radio called Mother, in which each letter of the word stood for some maternal virtue. Magazine and TV advertisements induced people to buy their food products by showing a warm, round, motherly type of woman preparing or serving the product. On the opposite side, women who lack nurturing qualities have always been excoriated in fairy tales, literature, and the movies. The evil stepmother of Hansel and Gretel, the wicked queen in Snow White, cruel stepmother of Cinderella, these women must come to a bad end. So too must cold, self-absorbed women like Ibsen's Hedda Gabler. Films in the 40s and 50s opened with plucky, aggressive women who by the end of the movie had been conquered and feminized by persistent men. Most women accepted such images, not because they were weak and silly, because some deep, earthy wisdom told them that the nurturing qualities of women were essential and there could be no substitute for them. In case you're getting nervous at this point, let me remind you that my title includes feminine and free. By the end of the book, I hope to have shown that a woman's strength, vitality, and sense of adventure need not be sacrificed for her to be feminine. Indeed, they can be part of it. Let us turn now to the distortions of nurturing outlined earlier: nagging, possessiveness, and smothering. In New York City, I once witnessed a scene that has helped me to understand how these distortions come about. A tiny, filthy playground among the tall buildings had no heavy rubber safety pads under the equipment. Tiny tots would climb up a huge slide, and if their mothers didn't catch them at the bottom, would land with a thud on the concrete. I shall never forget the touching sight of toddlers gleefully screeching their way down the slide, while their mamas stood tensely, arms outstretched, faces taut, waiting to protect them from brain concussions. This scene became a primary example to me of what philosophers call contingency. We are finite, fragile human beings. The slightest accident can kill us instantly. We are contingent beings, not an absolute being like God, who remains solidly perfect no matter what happens. The fact of contingency poses a difficult and sometimes unbearable problem for those who love others. When we so keenly appreciate the preciousness of another individual, a child, a husband, a parent, a friend, how could we not become worried, even paralyzed with fear at the thought of all the dangers that threaten the beloved? The child sees the world as a wonderful place of possibility, while the mother may come to view it as pure danger. Nagging can be analyzed as a petty way of trying to ensure that things go well for loved ones. Brush your teeth, comb your hair, put on your rubbers, etc. All these orders are given to help prevent future suffering, such as rotting teeth, social ostracism, or a cold. Though not as extreme as possessiveness and smothering, nagging or henpecking can become an extremely disagreeable to the victim. It is inimical to a free, fun-loving atmosphere. In possessive smothering, the woman wraps herself like a cocoon around her loved ones. First, she holds them safe against the frightening world. Then she tries to mold them into the image that she cherishes for them. Finally, her need to control replaces any respect for their own individuality and freedom. In a perceptive passage, the philosopher Ada Stein describes the negative traits of some women as an excessive interest in others, curiosity, gossip, and an indiscreet need to penetrate into the intimate lives of others. She cannot endure quiet, reserved growth, Stein, 1987, 45. These traits can result in a woman treating others as if they belong to her, as her own things. A woman might overcome such possessiveness by adopting a philosophical attitude, shrugging her shoulders and uttering a cliche phrase, "So what can I do about it?" Or "What's the use of worrying?" Personally, I find that only a profound faith in God permits me to accept the myriad possibilities of suffering that threaten those I love. Only by putting them into God's hands can I release them from my own. A brilliant young student of mine, afflicted with a smothering mother, phrased it this way: "Bitchiness is fierce screaming. This incinerates a man." Simone de Beauvoir described the woman who overmothers this way: "Her dream is contradictory. She would have her son of unlimited power, yet held in the palm of her hand, dominating the world, yet on his knees before her." De Beauvoir, 1952, page 87 to 88. She keeps him homebound so that she can control him, but also hates him for not being a champion. Such a paradox can be described in this way: a woman tries to put the boy or man back into her womb for fear he will transcend her, tries to close the gap by keeping him in. M. Esther Harding, 1971, devotes a fascinating if troubling passage in her book, Women's Mysteries, to the sacrifice of the son. It is socially acceptable to a point, but psychologically dangerous when a mother sacrifices all her own interests in total devotion to her child. When she behaves in this way, she overprotects the son, who later becomes unable to meet the harsh realities of the world. The son gains the power to become strong only when she pushes him out into the world. I recall with tender pride an early episode in my relationship with my son. Full of admiration for the Montessori method of schooling young children, I sent my boy a little too prematurely to such a nursery. I didn't realize that in this particular institution, the smallest children would mingle with the sixth graders in the playground during the long unsupervised recesses. During his first week of nursery school, my 2.5-year-old child was clearly terrified of making his way among the 10-year-old giants. But the teacher told me not to worry, he would get used to it sooner or later. So the third day, I drove him to the school and stood behind the wire fence. My heart breaking, I watched him slowly try to steer a path through the big boys to the safety of his teacher, who was across the yard. About 3 feet away, he turned around and yelled to me, "Mommy, go away. Can't you see I can never do it with you standing there?" The poet Audre Lorde wrote in a similar vein, "Boys whisper to their mothers, let us sleep in your bed, but she closes the door. They become men." Lorde, 1978, page 9. These references to the psychological and sociological factors of nurturing strengthened me as a mother and helped me to understand how the idea of nurturing has been distorted. Similar considerations can be made about feminine charm. Years ago, teenage girls used to be sent to charm school in the hope that they would be transformed from gangling adolescents into suave young ladies. The very idea would make knowing adults smile. Charm is a quality much too elusive to be taught. Of course, the graduates of charm school knew how to dress well, how to sit in company with demurely crossed ankles rather than sprawled out on the sofa, how to apply makeup discreetly but effectively, and so forth. But is this really the same as being charming? In the popular film Gigi, a charming but ill-bred girl is tutored in sophistication in preparation to be mistress to a rich man about town. The results horrify him. Even when we analyze charm and identify its components, sweetness, expressiveness, receptivity, and sensual openness, it remains somewhat elusive. Some women have all these qualities, yet somehow lack a certain piquant element that turns a pleasant, comfortable woman into a charming, feminine one. Charm in a woman may well reflect how a father relates to his daughter. Psychologists recognize a certain stage of coquettishness in little girls. A father, brother, or other male figure can respond to such flirtatious with delight, or sometimes afraid of responding with too much sensuality with rejection or disgust. A mother may model charm for her daughter, although sometimes the more attractive a mother, the more inferior a daughter will feel. Particularly if she is physically less beautiful. On the other hand, a puritanical mother may punish her daughter for being charming, label her as a manipulator of men, and openly reject her as a potentially bad girl. A negative response to wild, free, girlish traits can stifle natural charm, which I believe is innate in all people, producing stiff, prudish, repressed, and shy daughters. Quietness, when not caused by fear of rejection, can of course be a lovely ingredient in a charming woman. The charming celibate woman is not prudish, rather she is wide open to the mystical love of God, which encompasses body as well as spirit. puritanical virgin hates the body and can't bear the idea of another person entering her. Authentic virginal purity can be a strong positive ingredient in feminine loveliness as well as a Christian virtue. Simone de Beauvoir claims that a man is attracted to a virgin because he thinks that if no one has used her, she can belong to him completely. More cynically, Bertrand Russell in Marriage and Morals, excerpted in Mayerwald's 1978, predicted that without sociological reinforcement of purity, men would refuse to acknowledge as their own the children they had conceived with women who had many lovers. Hence, the state would become the father of the children of the future. A charming but pure woman can use the force of the erotic in the service of genuine love. She can learn how to bring delight into those around her without hurting others into an ultimately unfulfilling intimacy. Naturally, charm in all its facets plays a large role in relationships that have the promise of commitment. Some Christian writers, eager to keep young people from sin, exalt an ideal of brotherly and sisterly affection even for engaged couples. This, I believe, goes too far. Sometimes it merely postpones romantic intimacy to marriage, but it can lead to a lack of openness to intimacy later in the marriage because partners have come to view one another only in practical or purely spiritual terms. In other instances, it results in romantic relationships with partners other than the two brotherly husbands. A certain light flirtatiousness in courtship can be positive, or it can become negative if it's expressed promiscuously. Sweetness, an aspect of feminine charm at one time revered, is now in danger of extinction. A charming woman, even if she is a free spirit with plenty of passion, is at the same time sweet. A more peaceful, contented woman may be pink lacy sweet, but there are red-hot ways of being sweet as well. Ice cream is sweet, but so is liquor. Sweetness can manifest itself in many different ways. It can be an expression of innocence, a feeling of surrender, or a quality of compassion. Sweetness comes when its opposite, bitterness, either has never been allowed to develop or has been overcome. The lack of sweetness can signify an unwillingness to be close to others, a desire to be barricaded behind a wall, a tendency to be hard and self-enclosed. Lack of sweetness can also come from immersion in practical tasks and a failure to develop the subtle nuances of love. The sarcastic woman directs her attention to everything ridiculous and defective in others. In contrast, the sweet woman sees the vulnerability behind the bad and seeks to bring out the better side of others through her faith in them. Nietzsche's dictum, though itself somewhat sarcastic, pronounces the truth. Woman learns how to hate in proportion as she forgets how to charm. Such are some of the positive aspects of the feminine virtue of charm, but the word charm itself has an ambiguous flavor, conjuring images, magic charms, and with them a feeling of danger. In Chinese thought, the feminine yin is dark, shady, stealthy, destructive, and cat-like. Love is full of the power to destroy, wrote Sappho, the Greek poetess of the 7th century BC. Men are afraid of falling under the power of woman, as in the famous biblical story of Samson and Delilah, or in Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra. The seductress uses her sensual openness, her apparent sweetness and empathy to control men for her own ends. She recognizes in herself and in the man the irrational weakness that sensual love creates. Love, the limb loosener, the bittersweet torment, the wild beast there is no withstanding, wrote Sappho. Gertrude von Lefort in The Eternal Woman, 1962, insightfully notes that while the whore serves the male as his object, she triumphs over him as she watches him become prey to the dark forces of life. In Seduction, according to de Beauvoir, the woman drags the man out of his transcendent world of meaningful goals into her own irrational immanence. I wonder what a prostitute might say about such a sophisticated theory. To focus on less extreme corruptions of charm, one might view the coy, flattering woman as one who wants to please too much. Lacking a sense of her own strengths, she becomes gushy and sentimental in her desire to find good in others on whom she might rely. The 18th century philosophy Mary Wollstonecraft pointed out in A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, excerpted in Mayerwald, 1978, that if a woman cultivates only her charms and not her mind and spirit, she has no inner faculties to rely on in marriage once the first period of delight is over. When a husband is bored with her superficial traits, she becomes coquettish with other men or vainly obsessed with her looks and clothing. Wollstonecraft's point is relevant to the image of woman presented in contemporary advertisements. The more shrunken the mind and spirit of a woman, the more she must add to her mask of physical perfection. Behind such foolishness lies a desperate plea: love me because I am so charming, so perfectly beautiful, because she has no hope of being loved for more substantial qualities. Such a woman spends hours before the mirror working on her looks. Narcissism becomes a substitute for the missing self-love that would produce true feminine charm. Sometimes a woman who devotes no time at all to her personal vanity puts enormous energy into creating a charming home. Paradoxically, if her only aim is to present an image of perfection, people will not want to visit and her family will be miserable. It is only when a home's decoration is permeated with love, beauty, and a concern for the needs of the inhabitants that a house becomes a place people want to visit and live in. Once again, we see that love makes the difference between the negative and positive ways of being truly feminine, in this case, charming. Love is the key to positive femininity.